Good morning, Jason. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Arrow, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, I want to thank you for what you've done for this nation, not only in our U.S. military, but as a lawmaker.
Well, thanks. Thank you very much. And we're just thanking each other. What a great start to this.
What a book. What a book. Invisible Storm is the name of it. And you take us into a well dedicated life that really you shaped this and basically when you got out, then the people shaped you, but you were strong with your word.
Oh, well, thanks, man. Yeah, no, it's a pretty unique story, right? I mean, it's pretty unique. I don't think there's been another story about having a secret, undiagnosed, untreated psychological disorder while pursuing the presidency. And so, anybody listening, if you've already read that book, keep moving. But I don't think it's been written. So, and I wrote it because this is the book that I needed to read 14 years ago. And I think if I had, right when I come home from Afghanistan, I think I would have gone and gotten treatment for my trauma then. But I didn't. Instead, I did what a lot of people do, whether they're in politics or not, which is, I just dove into my work and I used that to avoid myself. And, after a while, that just didn't work anymore.
Right. One of the things where I became really touched with this book was the fact that my father fought in World War II. There was no such thing as PTSD while I was growing up with my father. We just knew that something wasn't right and we needed to be the peacemaker for him.
Yeah. And there was probably other things where you were like, Dad doesn't like it when we sneak up on him,
Right.
or stuff
Right.
like that. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's the message that is sent to you when you're in the military, like from the moment you get off the bus at basic, you are taught that what you're doing is no big deal. Either what you're doing is no big deal compared to what somebody else is doing or what somebody else went through, or if they have to, they'll tell you compared to what somebody did in some other war, right? And a friend of mine who spent some time before I went to get help trying to convince me to go to the VA. He's a Marine who had gone to the VA for help, and he had said to me at one point, he said, man, somewhere there is a World War II vet who was at Normandy, who was first wave at D-Day, and he's like sitting in the back of a VFW hall, and he's explaining, yeah, I was first wave on the beach, but I was in the back of the landing craft. It's no big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And his point was that the reason that we win wars, the reason that he was able to keep going out on patrol in Iraq, the reason that I was able to keep going into meetings in Afghanistan as an intelligence officer, pretty much by myself, me and my translator, with people who might want to kill us, is because we believed that what we were doing wasn't that big of a deal. The problem, and I don't fault the Army for that, because that's how you get me to do the job, right? The problem is that when I got out of the service and when your dad got out of the service and everybody else, nobody sits you down and says, hey, actually, that was quite a big deal. Mm-hmm. And you may have some problems that you need to deal with. And so you go through a lot of years with, like in my case, you're having these night terrors and you feel like you're in danger all the time and your family's in danger and you start to have self-loathing and eventually that becomes depression and eventually suicidal thoughts. And the whole time I'm going, this can't be PTSD and it can't be related to my service because I have it on good authority that what I did was no big deal. And so, I think there's a lot of people listening to this right now who, maybe they're not a combat veteran. Maybe they're just, whatever. They had a bad divorce or doesn't really matter what it was. And they're going, yeah, but what I did was no big deal. So, and the thing is, that thought's not doing anything for you. It's not putting it in perspective. It's not doing anything for you to heal. It's just diminishing your ability to heal and delaying your healing. And what I wanted to get across in this book is that post-traumatic growth is a real thing, mm-hmm. and you can go after it. And if you do, you're going to feel a lot better.
You went through so many different transitions, like the first time that you put on the uniform. And then when you had that uniform on, you were like you said, you were in Afghanistan. But then when you came home to become a civilian again, that's a transition in the uniform because you became a lawmaker. That's a transition. The transitions you've gone through, how have you made it through, and have you well documented it in journals?
I wish I had been better about journaling because it would have made it way easier to write this book. But which is probably why it took me like a year to write it. I do journal a bit now, but I do sort of bullet points because it just sort of helps me digest my day and pay more attention to if my symptoms are starting to crop back up, like what I can do to manage them. Um, but yeah, I think that's one of the parts uh, of life that we don't acknowledge very often, is the idea that, especially as Americans, we really develop an identity around our work, and that's particularly true for veterans. For me, and I write about this in the book, it was kind of a smaller trauma just to leave the military, because being a soldier and thinking of myself as a soldier, that was the part of myself that I still really liked. And at that point, even though I was winning elections and getting adulation, I didn't like that part of myself. But I liked and I respected the part of me that was a soldier. And so when I was no longer part of the military, uh, it was very difficult for me to digest what that meant and who I was now. And I think a lot of soldiers go through that. And I think a lot of other people go through it, right? I mean, like, I had to do something similar when I decided that I was going to, drop out of public life, right? And now I see myself as a little league coach who is also an activist, who's involved in veterans causes and some political causes, but I'm not a politician right now. And you don't have to be like somebody who was going to run for president or serve in Afghanistan to relate to that, right? Like, if for you, like, if tomorrow you weren't a radio host and a podcaster, you would have to go through a process of coming to terms with, well, who am I? Like, who is Arrow, right?
Yep.
And who is Arrow separate from that? And that's one of the first times I ever sat down with my therapist at the VA. I said to him that one of my goals was to find a way to be happy without external validation, and to just be proud of being me, being Jason Kander, and not having to be Captain Jason Kander or Secretary of State Jason Kander. And it's taken work, but I've gotten there, and boy, it's worth working to get to it.
One of the things that we share together is the fact that the Google Calendar, you don't like empty boxes. I don't like empty boxes either. And I love that chapter. I don't want to do this anymore because, keep flying or crash. And you made a lot of choices in this.
Yeah. I was definitely at a point where if I could just keep moving, I felt like then I could avoid myself, right? And I didn't really understand it that clearly as I do now, but that's what I was doing. And it came to a head when I got to a point where I was just sort of piecing together one endorphin hit after another, one performance after another, and so like the endorphin hit would last long enough to keep me to the next one, right? And then I got to a point where I gave this huge speech in New Hampshire that was, this was after I had sat down with President Obama, and he had said, you have what I had, you're the natural, and had been encouraging about the idea of me running for president. And now I'm giving this speech in New Hampshire. For the year before me, the keynote for this speech was Elizabeth Warren. The year after me, it was Joe Biden. And this was the, hey, I'm going to run for president moment. And it was on national TV, and I crushed it. Like, I've given good speeches in my career. I've given bad speeches. That was a really good one. And it was, and I felt really good about it. And I was riding that high. And usually that high would last a few days. But then the next day I got on the plane in Manchester to fly home. And as soon as my butt hit the seat, I just felt empty again. And I was like, man, this is not good. Like, something's really wrong if this one doesn't last a while. And, it wasn't that long after that I said, okay, I got to deal with this. So I pulled out of the presidential race, and I said, I'm going to run for mayor of Kansas City. And that was going really well as a campaign, right? Like, if you go from running for president to running for mayor, like, it should go well. Like, I was going to win, but I was getting worse and worse. And now I was getting worse faster. And, it wasn't that long after that I was on suicide watch at the VA in Kansas City, and talking to a psych resident. And when I told them that I was, just a few months ago was going to run for president, and that I talked to President Obama about it, that he asked me how often I heard voices. So, it's, which is why, the book is kind of funny, so that people will read about a difficult subject. But, I had to go through those transitions and everything, and I had to get to a point where I no longer was chasing those highs in order to be able to live life and be happy without those highs.
One of the things where I'm so grateful for what you have put into this book is the way that you honor Native Americans, in the way that you explain to us as readers that Native Americans, when their men would come back from war, they worked with the entire nation of people to say, this is what they've been through. You teach us so much in your epilogue. It's almost like, no, this is where I wanted the book to start.
Oh, yeah, thanks. It's funny you say that, because the epilogue of the book in the last few chapters, which is where I take people inside my therapy sessions and what I learned, that's the book I really wanted to write. But I understood that if you want people to read about that, you really got to give them the story that they really want first. Mm-hmm. You got to give them the crazy story. Maybe I shouldn't use the word crazy, but anyway, the crazy story about, running for president while you're battling your own mind, and invest them in it so that they'll get to that payoff. But yeah, in America today, we expect our veterans to get, I think I say it in the book, as a chicken fajita roll up for free at Applebee's on Veterans Day, and then be the same person they were before the war. And that causes veterans, or anybody who's been through trauma, to feel very isolated and very separate from the rest of us. Whereas the Native American cultures and some other cultures, they do it very differently. They bring the warrior back in, and the entire community comes together, and the warrior tells their story, and everybody sits there and listens to those stories in an unvarnished way. And what that allows is for the warrior to feel reintegrated to the tribe without feeling like they're in the tribe but separate from the tribe, because people understand them now. And that's really important, because if you think about it, there's no shortage of folks out there who want to brand associate with the military. Every commercial that you see on TV is like a soldier coming home to their dog, and then they're like, which is why you should buy this car. Mm-hmm. And that's fine, I get that, but we tend to hold up veterans as like infallible heroes who don't feel things. And the truth is, like, we're just regular people who did a thing. And it's important for us to feel understood and to feel not like mascots, but like humans. And so, the work I do now at Veterans Community Project, where I get the opportunity to help veterans, come out of homelessness, that gives me a chance to do that every day. And it's really meaningful to me, and the brands and the other folks that we work with who put real work and real money into it. I feel good about their brand association stuff, and that's why all of my royalties from this book go to Veterans Community Project.
Diana is your teammate, soulmate, best friend, and hero. Inside my heart as a reader, you just told me that you have not been alone. Even though it felt like it, she's always been there. Yeah,
man. She is a huge part of this book, just as she has been a huge part of my life since we were 17, my wife. And it's one of the reasons this memoir does something different than other memoirs, which is every chapter you get my wife coming in and writing her own first-person perspective of what was happening, because nobody goes through mental health challenges alone, and because she developed her own secondary PTSD, because I was no picnic to live with. And even without going to Afghanistan, she, when you have your husband constantly telling you how much danger we're all in, and you're having to wake him up from his own night terrors, like over time, you end up needing your own therapy. And Errol, let me just say, man, like I've been doing a lot of these interviews over the last few days, and the book just came out on Tuesday. So there's a fair amount of people who, like, they didn't get a chance to read the book and they kind of pretend one way or the other. I can tell you actually took the time to read the book, and I just want to say, like, I really appreciate that. Oh. Thank you for doing that.
No, I thank you for this book, because I'm still trying to understand my father's life. And I live vicariously through you to help understand the pain that I went through.
Well, thanks, man. It means a lot to me that it means that to you.
Well, you got to come back to this show anytime in the future, Jason. The door is always going to be open for you.
Well, thank you. I will do that. I really appreciate it.
Please do.
Thank you very much for having me.
You be brilliant today, okay, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Aaron.